Hey, everybody. I'd like to welcome Rhonda Hunt McCarthy to the podcast. And she is a spiritual healer, amongst other things, but we're going to focus in on that side of her. And Rhonda, what we do here on the podcast is pretty straightforward, which is to discuss how the outer circumstances of our lives will stimulate our inner experience in two very distinct ways. And one is through what I, as a therapist, would call the psychological ego or the separate sense of self. And the other perspective would be the divine soul connection that we have to all that is. And why is it important to know the difference of these two perspectives? Well, that's where you come in as our guest to help us relate to this very deep inner conflict that each one of us finds ourselves in, and gives us ideas on how to integrate these two very different perspectives into one full, beautiful, messy human experience. So, Rhonda, again, thanks for coming to the show. And please jump on in and finish introducing yourself.
Thank you very much, Wynn. And I appreciate and thank you and all of the forces and soul and ego that come together to make this podcast possible, because the more people that we can reach out to and help then and hold that sacred space, that's what's needed in the world right now. And yeah.
Yeah, and before we hit record, you were saying, like, I think I'm here to heal maybe all of my karma, and I do believe that, quite honestly, that is what we're doing right now on the planet. Is everyone's stuff is here to deal with and to uncover, and including the collective ego, which is really obvious to see within our own countries, upheavals and things that are happening. And so I really appreciate your perspective. It was kind of like a humbling kind of like, I don't know, understanding that you seem to have about that. And yeah, I appreciated what you had to say. And so, the point again of the podcast is to discern the difference between the soul that is here to heal and that separate sense of the ego that we create out of necessity. Some of us are doing it in, terms that are pretty comfortable, and some of us are not. And you clearly are someone who has created their ego out of the most uncomfortable conditions that I think someone could experience on this planet. And so, what I guess just start walking us through, how your ego or a separate sense of self began to form while you were a child.
Okay, I can do that. A lot of scenarios happened along the way, and most of this that I'm about to say, I was not aware of until in my 30s. I mean, I remember I thought I had a great childhood. I really did. I didn't think anything was that abnormal. Even though my parents were divorced when I was 3, my father moved my older sister and I in with his parents because he was putting wood in the fire one evening and felt strange, and he turned around and my mother was holding a knife and was ready to kill him.
Oh my God.
As I grew and I helped care for her the last 2 years of her life. So I asked her some of these questions before she died. And she told me that scenario, and what had happened to her was that she felt she had to kill him. She had voices telling her she had to kill him. She had to kill my sister, me, and then herself.
Oh my God.
Luckily, my father saved us all, and she went into a mental health institute, and I never lived with her again. However, as I grew, was able to go during school vacation, things like that. And she ended up marrying a multimillionaire. So it was two very different lifestyles. With my dad and his parents, it was humble and lots of love and comfort and peace. With my mother, there was lots of money and the mansion and the pool and all of those things. And I'd get picked up in a Rolls Royce. But at home with dad and his family, we're riding around in the old Rambler, that's falling apart and those types of things. So I had this whole juxtaposition. So
yeah.
So
I would say so.
Now, what I started remembering in my 30s was some of the abuse that was happening. And my stepfather, along with my mother's father, was part of a ritualistic cult. And in my 30s, as I was studying deep emotional cleansing, I went to a class, and it was several weeks long, and we worked with each other. And the preface of it was to be able to scream. And even if you didn't have the words, you were getting the emotion out, because at that point, like, I didn't even have visuals or knowledge of that anything had been wrong, so to speak.
Wow.
And in this class was a woman whose father was actually part of this cult that my stepfather and grandfather were. So
my
here
God.
we were 30 years later into our life, and we actually met. So that's the only way that I really have proof, because I couldn't get anyone in the family to admit it or say anything about it. And the other part that I knew for proof was that when my grandfather died, I saw a piece of paper that had a health. They had taken me to the doctors, and I had gonorrhea at 6 years old.
Oh my God.
So I do remember at 6 years old going to the doctor and having they put these big old shots in your butt. 3 days. I don't know if it was 3 weeks apart, but I remember they did, both my sister and I.
Oh my God.
So that as that deep emotional cleansing part started happening, then my memories started coming back. And one of my biggest fears was that I couldn't speak up. Like I just shut down. To this day, I'm 65 years old. My first reaction will be to shut down. I can't speak. I go into panic, which is can't breathe, all of these types of things. Through the years, I've learned how to manage that. And I help teach other people to manage that also. But at the same time, when it's happening, I'm really amazed that it still actually happens sometimes. Within the last few years, I've been triggered at least 3 times, to the extent that it brings all of that, surfaces it back up. So as my ego got developed, it became a chameleon. I was the friend that did whatever the other friend was. Like, for example, 8th grade, my best friend got her hair chopped off, and I had very long hair, and I went and got my hair chopped off, and then hated it but I did it because my friend, I was that person.
Yeah. Wow. So I mean, your initial sort of trauma in the family was knowing that your mother did this to you. How old were you when your mom was standing behind your dad with a knife?
I was almost 3.
So you may not have had a recollection of what happened or known what happened, but you knew all of a sudden your mom was gone. Right. So how do you remember adjusting to that? Like how would you have survived as a child? Do you remember? I mean, that was your first trauma.
I do remember. And I did not adjust well at all. I cried a lot, just cried and cried and cried. And as an adult, I think back and I feel really bad for my father, because he would be sitting there trying to soothe me, and I would be crying for mommy. I want my mother. I was angry and just sad and cried all the time.
Yeah. So when you couldn't get your mother back, how did you soothe yourself eventually, or adjust? I think that's what the ego does, right? It says, okay, well, I'm now alone and I need to do something to take care of myself. Are you saying that's when you became a chameleon before?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So just be what everybody wanted me to be.
In case they would leave you. The typical clinical abandonment issues that we call it, right? So you're just like, I'll do whatever, whenever, however you need, because I don't want another person to leave.
Right. Which then leads into a teen who doesn't know how to say no to anything. So smoking, drinking, drugging, sexing, all of it.
Yeah. And so you're completely unaware. You're going over to visit your mother and her her husband, and you're somehow completely unaware every time that this is happening to you, and then you're coming home and you're building this whole other unconscious part of you that I don't even know if I wouldn't call that the ego. I'd call that something else.
Right.
I don't know what you would call that, but.
Well, I see it as demons. I know some people have a hard time with that word and imagery, and I don't think that they're all bad. Just misinformed sometimes, but
Mhm.
it gets passed on from generation to generation. And
Mm.
certainly for my mom to have those voices in her head and to be thinking about killing, then she had some pretty intense demons in her own life. And when
Yeah.
I looked back into her history, which she did confirm some of it for me, she was extremely abused also,
Oh,
and
wow.
sexually, and her mom beat her.
Mm.
And yet her mother was like my best soft place to land. So she did a
Wow.
whole switch from daughter to granddaughter. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
That is so complicated.
right,
And
right.
so, yeah, so as you're growing up, like you said, your ego is mostly this chameleon, just doing whatever to stay safe, but maybe not consciously even understanding why that's happening. I think that's the trick of the ego is we are looking through it and we have no idea that we're looking through it. And on top of that, we don't know why it wants us to do these things and we can't not do it. It's like you had to do those things. It was like not a choice. And so as you were becoming an adult, how did you start dealing with this unconscious trauma as well as being a chameleon? How did you get in touch with your soul at some point through something that
Not
happened
not
to you?
not until my 30s.
Yeah. So
So
how were you trying to do it otherwise? Like how are you trying to navigate your life otherwise?
overcompensating by doing things for everybody else to please everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So wanted children, got married to an abusive person.
Mm,
He never laid a hand on me. And we worked together 17 years. We've worked through our stuff
mm,
because he came from a traumatic family also. And
yes.
so we played that out for 17 years. And then I finally divorced. And then I overate.
Mm,
And luckily, once I started having children, I have 2 daughters and 5 grandchildren. I
mhm,
absolutely adore them all. Once I started having them, something enough was sensible enough in me that realized, you know what, this is not so much fun waking up with a hangover or being drugged up when the baby is waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning.
mhm,
Needs my attention. So I weaned myself off from a lot of that. But
mm,
I was a martyr. I was needy. I just begged for attention. I had
yeah.
affairs. Um, you know, those are the ways that I coped.
Wow. Yeah. So all those sort of egoic tendencies that were front and center, just like you said, addictions or affairs or things where you think this one good feeling might be the answer, which it never is. And then eventually you realize like, I feel like the ego basically implodes on itself and it's like, yeah, this is not working. But you don't
Right.
necessarily know what to do. A lot of times see people in therapy coming in and they know what's not working, but they have zero idea what to do and they don't want to explore extraordinary circumstances of actual spiritual healing. So I'm so glad at some level you found it. Somehow you found it. How did that happen?
At 27, I was looking at getting divorced, and it was a long process. Didn't get divorced until 34. So what's that? 7 years it took me to
Yeah.
really figure it out,
Wow.
and because I had quit my good job at the paper mill and I was doing part-time things, but I was basically the mom at home and getting the kids to the sports and school and all of that sort of thing and doing the bookwork for his business and those types of things. So there was a point where I decided, and he and I talked about it, my husband at the time, we weren't going to have affairs anymore and we were going to make this marriage work.
Mm.
And I had a breakdown. And as I was telling him, someone that I had been with, and I started crying and I couldn't stop. Like I just
Wow.
cried and it didn't stop. And so he got scared. He didn't know what to do. And I didn't know what to do. So he called his sister and his sister said, well, maybe you should take her to the hospital. So he took me to the hospital. It was on a Sunday. Somebody came over, I think it was a sister, to take care of the girls while we were gone. And then I had seen a psychologist about 3 times, and I totally didn't even think about calling him, but the hospital called him. So he said, come right over. and he said, I give you two choices. One, we can do intense therapy like 2-3 times a week, outpatient, or you can go into the Seton unit, which was a mental health hospital, for a 21-day program and see what happens. And my husband at the time, we didn't have good health insurance, so I knew that wasn't going to go over well. But because of going into the 21-day program, the health insurance actually would cover it. So I opted for that. And I was in there for about 5 days and learned a lot about that I was just overdoing everything. You know, your psyche gets to a point where it just can't handle everything.
Yeah.
And that is when more of the memories of the past were starting to surface.
Wow.
So by the time I was 31 and having a hysterectomy and again going through another mental breakdown, I didn't end up back in the hospital, but I just knew this isn't healthy. It's not working for me. I'm going crazy. I actually saw little demons running across the kitchen floor. You know, so obviously I was having a psychotic break, but nobody could really help me or understand what that was. And I certainly couldn't tell that to somebody.
Yeah. Well, and I do think, like you said, the psychotic break or whatever you want to call it is really the ego asking us to do the impossible. And to your point, like our limited little cute human form can't do it. At some point it tries and tries and tries, and the ego keeps pushing. And eventually, like you said, like, you're asking me to do the impossible. You're asking me to do everything for everybody else. You're asking me to pretend like what happened to me didn't happen. I can't do that anymore. And so in a weird way, it's helpful, but it sounds horrific. You know, and then, like you said, then you had to deal with the memories and seeing things that are not of this world. Yeah. And all of that.
Yeah. So thankfully, my husband at the time, I actually did share that with him. And I started sharing things like I couldn't leave the shower curtain closed because in my mind's eye, I could see somebody was in there and they had been stabbed and they were dead and bleeding and dying. I couldn't take the trash out to the barn. The garbage can was out in the barn. I couldn't take the big green garbage can out to the barn because I knew in my mind's eye there was a dead baby in that bag.
Oh my God.
These things were unfolding, and that's part of what I did see in one of the rituals, where they would take little fetuses and then they would sacrifice them. And and so all of that started to unfold. And here's the really cool thing. I had left my husband and come back 3 times.
Wow.
So this third time, because financially I just couldn't do it. And he kept saying, come back, we'll figure it out. And we did try to figure it out. We really tried hard. One night I'm laying in bed and I felt like this cocoon, like I just only had this much of the bed and I'm laying on my side. And that wasn't true, but that's how I felt. So I was just on my little and felt like I was in a cocoon, and there was a window beside me. And this was like in the middle of the night. It was dark, and all of a sudden that window lit up. And I saw Jesus. And I'm not a hugely religious person, but I saw Jesus. And all of a sudden I felt the cocoon open up and I felt like a butterfly. Like, wow, I have wings. I can spread my wings. I can fly out of here. Wow. And I went back to sleep and I rolled over and he and I were face to face, and we kind of just opened our eyes at the same time that morning. And he looked at me and he said, "You're leaving, aren't you?" And I said very clearly, "Yes, I am."
Wow.
And from then on, I was able to.
Wow.
Yeah.
But he also sounds like he was a good guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So after seeing Jesus, that's pretty major. Is that when you went on your healing journey of all these other sort of extraordinary ideas?
I did. It started out with Native American. I always felt attracted to that. So the more I got outside and went hiking and did different things, a feather would fall, and I'd catch it, or little things would happen. And so I started studying and reading more. Somebody said to me one time, "Oh, you need to check this out, Reiki. What's that?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
what's energy?" And when I went to my first Reiki class, I was seeing things that I shouldn't have been able to see, like I just could.
Yeah.
And I had never sat with people communicating like that and talking openly about, oh, well, I
Mm.
see this and I see that and I feel this and I feel that. And it was the first time I felt like I was home.
Yeah. So initially your visions were horrifying. You're talking about like seeing the little demons run across the floor. And
Mm.
then after seeing Jesus, you're able to start seeing some good, not good energy, but like positive, expansive, loving energy.
Right. And
That's
I
awesome.
had really great counselors. I had two different, and a pastoral counselor and more of a mainstream counselor, and was still doing the deep emotional cleansing work, and then got into shamanic practices. So soul retrievals and past life
Mhm.
experiences and contract room, and so that brought me more to like what the soul is doing. And then I got into the mystery school traditions and learned with the Rocky Mountain Mystery School and the Seventh Ray Mystery School. So that really expanded my horizon and understanding of the soul, which I know is a big piece of what your work is too.
Yeah.
Bringing
Well, yeah, it's
ego
trying
to
to,
the soul.
yeah. And so how do you define the soul now that you've been on all these journeys? How do you define it?
To me, it's like this all encompassing, it feels like a warm blanket around me. That's not so easy at times because I really understand at this point in my life, my soul came in to do certain things.
Yeah.
My ego didn't always know what that was, but somewhere along the line, they woke up enough to talk to each other and kind of merge like this. And so as that process happens, then the soul gets to speak more, and I
Hmm.
get to listen more, and I understand more. And as you spoke in the beginning, the collective going through a cleansing and all of that soul work that comes in, I feel that my soul came in this time to do the horrific things, to learn from them and have the experiences, because when we experience something, then we understand it for somebody else and we can
Hmm.
hold sacred space. So the
Yeah.
deep, dark secrets that people hold are profound. Like they're just, here, and they're in the body and they're in the mind and they're in the soul because that person came to do a certain thing in their contract with their
Yeah.
soul.
Yeah, I love that. And I think to your point is I am at the point where I'm doing my best to distinguish between the two perspectives. And, this podcast is helping me understand how people like yourself have brought it back into one full experience. Because for me, for a long time, it's like these are two separate things. One is good and one is bad, and that's not true. The ego
No.
is our inner child. It's the thing that helped you survive a horrific childhood. And,
Mm.
like you said, if you didn't have that at the time, if you didn't have the ability to disassociate and forget, you probably wouldn't be here now doing the great work that you're doing for other people also.
Right.
Right. And everybody literally on the planet, I think, needs to heal. And so that means we need a lot of us to go through something. And maybe we do it first so that we
Mhm.
can walk other people through it. I always picture us like pulling people out of like the water. Like you're just reaching down because you just got out and you're just reaching back to get somebody on the life raft with you too. So it's not like we did anything better or more monumental. It's just like I just happened to get out first, and now I'm reaching back to grab you too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that sounds like where you are because you did start working with other people. How did that transition go? Where you started working with other people?
Well, before I get there, I do want to say that I, are you familiar with IFS, Internal Family Systems, Richard
Hmm.
Schwartz work? So that was introduced to me, who I continue to work with, that therapist to this day, Michael
Wow.
Kresge. I call him my I call all of my counselors and helpers along the way my lifeline, because without them, I wouldn't be able to do the work that I do today. But I think it's very, very highly important for all of us to still continue to do our work. And what I found is that the ego, based on what our experiences are so full of all these multiplicity of parts, right?
Yeah.
That I'm not sure, and I said this to you earlier, that we ever get to a place in a lifetime where we get to heal all of that. Because so far, I still have parts that are coming up that I've never met before, and now I get to work with them. And the soft part that I want to share is, when I was learning the shamanic way of things, we would reach in and grab things and pull and remove and do sort of like an exorcist type of thing, and do the soul retrieval for somebody else. So I'm doing the journeying for them, but then I come back and relay the story and blow their soul back into them. And what I've learned with IFS work is that entities, demons even, they came in to do a certain job.
Yeah.
And so they're doing what they were asked to do, and that doesn't mean that they're bad. Maybe they have another job that they could be doing. You don't have to rip something out. And the best way for somebody to retrieve their own soul is to go on a guided visualization to walk them to their own experience and to their own parts, so that they can integrate and bring those back into themselves and heal that part. So then the next layer can surface to come back up.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and so how did was it just a organic thing where you said, like, I'm helping other people while I'm also healing, that you became a healer? Like, how did that work for you to get to the place where you have your own clients?
Great question. Thank you. After I did the deep emotional cleansing, there was a certification. So I got registered through the state of Maine as a counselor, and then went back and finished a bachelor's. I never did go after my master's, basically because of financing. But in that, something that feels unfulfilled, but maybe by the time I'm 70. When I was getting my bachelor's, there was a lady that was 70 years old finishing her bachelor's.
Wow.
So and that proved to me you're never too late. You always have time to figure something out and do more. And so once I had that certification and the counseling registration, then I started seeing clients and helping them with the deep emotional work. And then that went into, once I started learning about Reiki, then it was easier to have people come and I could do the energy work on them. And then as I started doing my more studies and learning, then it was easier to see things and say, oh, well, or do you know this guide that's around you? Have you met them yet? Because I can see those things and relay that information to them. And
yeah. And so now that
as time went on.
And so now, do you feel like you've fully integrated all these different perspectives? I know you said that some are still popping up, but the ones that have been there and you have worked through, do you feel like an integrated whole person?
I feel like an integrated person. I do not feel whole. There's something in me that is still searching.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just the maverick in me, or the gypsy that will never settle down in this lifetime. I'm not sure. But
yeah. And I think that sounds like your actual persona, which I think is different than the ego. I think we do have a soul personality, right? Like, still searching, still thinking about how more can I help people, how more can I help others. And I know that not only through trauma work, but you said recently you've become a financial guide as well, which is so interesting, I think, because spiritual people will often say, like, well, money is the root of all evil, or they'll say something like, we shouldn't be going after money, but we all agree on this planet to use money. And I
Right.
definitely think that, to your point, women, especially on this planet, should take a hold of their God-given right to become financially free. And I love that after everything you've been through and all the healing and the, the multiple dimensions you've gone through, right? Literally gone to see other
Right.
dimensions. Like, you come back and you're like, okay, yeah, but we still need to make money.
Right.
And I want to help people be financially free. And I just love that. And I think that that is part of what I'm talking about with ego and soul
Mhm.
integration, because we don't need money when we're a soul, but our egos and our personas still, like you said, have bills and have kids and grandkids you want to spoil now. And it's just such a beautiful way of, to me, balancing these two perspectives, and then
Right.
bringing in a soul-based perspective to an egoic desire to have money and feed our family. I mean, it's just, to me, you seem like a whole person, even though you're still on your journey.
Thank
Um,
you.
for what I'm learning, it's inspiring to know that someone can be at the depths of being told they're having a psychotic break, or whatever it was that you were told at the time, and then living through horrific memories, and then realizing something happened to you, and going through all that, and then becoming a healer yourself, and then again, full circle, coming back to like, but we all need finances, it
Mm.
really does seem like you embrace the whole experience, to me.
Yeah, thank you. Well, there's certain parts of the life where the cycle, you
Mm,
learn so much. I mean, I have two divorces, two bankruptcies.
mm.
My place burned down. It was like I
Oh my
moved 10 times in 10 years. And, it was just like all of it's like burn down, be the phoenix, rise again. You
God.
get torn down. I've had jobs where I've gotten pushed out because of other men's egos
Mm,
and didn't have the backing to be able to keep that job. And then understanding, okay, well, I don't belong there anyway. But
yeah.
at the same time, it's like when you're thinking about money, this is a very expensive earth that we live on.
Hmm.
And it's not getting any better
Yeah.
anytime soon.
Hmm.
In Maine, rural Maine, people have to pay $1,500 to $2,000 for a one-bedroom apartment. I mean, how
Wow.
can they even have a vehicle? And then people complain about, the kids don't move out. Well, how can they? We
Yeah.
haven't set them up for success.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
So again, I really appreciate your story. How can people find you now if they want to work with you?
I have my website is www.helpingwoundedwomenshine.com.
Okay. I
Helping
like
wound
that.
helpingwoundedwomenshine.com. I do work with men.
Okay.
I have several men clients. However, uh, I just I think there's a time when women right now especially need that special focus, and that's why I focused on that.
Mm-hmm.
I want that to be. I want them to know. I want the little girls that are being trafficked, and I know little boys are too.
Yeah.
Mm. But I want them to grow up and to know, or the ones that are already teenagers, or the ones that are adults and have
Hmm.
these pieces and parts of them that they can't connect because they're so broken. I
Yeah.
want them to know that there is a way out. There's a way to trust yourself enough in life so that you can move through on a daily basis. It's okay to cry. It's
Hmm.
okay to feel sad and depressed and all of that. And at the same time, let's get some more joy. Let's get some upliftment. Let's get a person in your head that can help you to reprogram. And so reaching out to them through the website. My email is rhondahuntmccarthy@gmail.com.
Hmm.
I just love to love. And I want people to be, well, I like that you said whole, because
Yeah.
it's a wonderful place to feel whole, to feel content,
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, it's so beautiful. You just said, I love to love, like these horrible egos that, were malicious towards you as a child somehow did not ruin the core of you, which is you the love to love. And I do believe the soul is that strong, can do amazing things and miracles. And I love that Jesus showed up for you. He's my guy. I love Jesus. So yeah, so again, thank you so much for being here. What a powerful discussion and inspiration you are.
Well, you're very welcome, Wynn, and thank you for holding space for such a sacred podcast, because your clients, people that you have, are also going to connect with their soul because of what you're doing. And
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
work.
Well, that's the only reason we're here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You as well.